Excellent. Coming out to attend our webinar today. We're taking a look at version control and history. Now, this is one of those subjects that for us at FileHold is so basic that we're like, oh, why would we want to do web? But as it turns out, there's a really good reason to talk about version control and history because it's such a fundamental part of our software and it's so important for success as you move through using it that we want to make sure we're taking a deeper dive into it. So as always, before I actually get started on doing a presentation, just a couple words about what version control is. And I put a graphic up there of a chain because I actually think that's the best way to think about version control is that it's a history of what you've done into the system. It's a record of the changes made between documents. It's showing that your documents you're adding into the system have changed and what their history is. So version control is automatic with FileHold. As soon as you add something into the system, it's immediately under version control. They automatically become 1. Now 1 is, by the way, a default. There is a setting, so you can make an initial version a 0 if you wanted to, but for the most part, when we talk about adding documents in, out of the box, any document you add into there will be 1, or whatever your starting number is. So you got that 1. These are going to be sequential as your numbers increase. We're going from 1 to 2 to 3. We are not dealing with 1.1s. We're not dealing with 1As. It's just 1 to 2 to 3. And that's because these are absolute version numbers. We are talking about this is version 1 of the document when it came into the software. This is version 2 when it was modified. This is version 3 when it was modified. What those modifications were do not matter from our perspective when we're talking about version numbers. It doesn't matter if that version number that you're looking at there, we don't care if the change that was made to that document was somebody added a comma to one of the paragraphs or if they added 10 pages of content at the end. When we're talking about the version numbers in FileHold, it's just the document has been checked out, someone's made a change, and it's been checked in. The other advantage of version control is that the current version is the only one that's visible when we're browsing through areas. So whether you're looking at a document in a folder or in a virtual folder or in search results, the default is we're only showing you the current version of that document. And I'm saying default because I understand that it is possible to hide those prior, when you're doing a search, you can bring back those results if you wanted to, if you choose to see prior versions hidden in the system. But the default is we keep that stuff obscured so that it doesn't clog up your results with old information. So the other nice thing about version control is you're always seeing the current content pushed forward. The version numbers change when the document is modified when the check-in, check-out process goes, or check-out, check-in, however you want to say it. And again, we're talking about that's the only thing that ticks those numbers up. So it doesn't matter what's being done to the document, whether it's been opened, whether the metadata has been modified. We're talking about when the document itself, the core content has been changed. That's when we check up to the next number in the system. So a little bit about check-in, check-out. And really, we should be saying it as check-out, check-in because that's the sequence that we do. And we check the document out, we make changes, we check it back into FileHold. But just the way people say it, it sounds like it's in the wrong order. So we end up often saying check-in, check-out. But really, it should be check-out, check-in. So this allows authorized users to make new versions of the document through that process. And I say authorized because it's very likely that you'll be in a situation where you have some users who are read-only users, they don't have a right to check out content, or it's in an area where they otherwise wouldn't have that right to do it. You also will only see us being able to check out a document. You're not able to check out records, you're not able to check out content from the archive. Those are both preserved items within FileHold, and so you can't make any changes to them. Now this marks the document so it cannot be further modified or deleted while it's in checkout. So while a document is checked out, it's been suspended. And we'll see that in a moment when we take a look at the stop sign marks beside the document. It's going to give us some information about what that is. When we check out a document, we're downloading to our local workstation or to a drive of your choosing. Again, we'll get into those details in a moment, but the action is getting a download of the document so that you can work on it with the native application. Remember, we don't really edit documents within FileHold unless we're using our viewer. The new version can be the one downloaded and modified, or it can be a totally different document. I actually do this all the time. I have working documents and I do a bunch of tailoring on them. I check out the document, I check in my brand new document. And by the way, that could also be a different extension. It could be a different type of document. This is under your control. So if it makes sense to have one version of the document be a Word file and the second one be a PDF, that's completely legitimate. So don't be afraid that or feeling like you have to be locked into something. Now, with the check-in process, with the version control, audit history is a major element to this as well. All the actions that you do in FileHold are being logged, and the audit history is an uneditable record of actions done by a user to a document or to a record. That includes viewing, that includes modification, that includes all of those individual details and steps. So the audit history can't be modified, so all those actions are done. Now, each user creates their own audit trail, and that audit record is linked to their account. So you remember that your users have an account, and so if you disable that account, then they're not going to be generating any further audit activity because they're disabled, they're no longer a user. This is also a reason why if you have somebody who's not going to be using FileHold for a time, and you want to give somebody else that license, that what you want to do is disable them as opposed to delete them, because it's the account that carries the audit trail of information. So you just can't generate more of them when it's disabled. You can also share accounts. That's absolutely possible. But the downside of sharing an account means that, first of all, only one person, if it's a full user, can use that account at a time. So you'll immediately kick someone else off if they're trying to use FileHold in a shared environment. But the audit trail that you're creating is not identifiable to an individual. It's not one person who's going to be responsible for it. It means that you don't know exactly who did what. And we see that often with our guest portal or the anonymous portal as a feature, because it allows people to access, but we lose the audit record because we don't know who's accessed the document, only that it's been accessed. Users can access audit records of document versions, and administrators can access the total record of the document audit trail. And we're going to see that later on too. So this idea of the audit log is accessible information for anyone who can see the document. If you can see the document, you can see the audit record that it's attached to. All right, let's take a dive in and take a look at our version control. So I'm just going to hop out of PowerPoint. Let's go over to FileHold, and I hope everyone knows what we're looking at here. We're looking at the desktop application, and we're going to start up here with the My Favorites, because I have a few favorited documents that I tend to keep up here. I'll just mention, for those people who don't know, this is a test environment that I have. So a lot of the information that I have for the audit record is me just playing with documents, working on them, playing with features. So you're going to see my name over and over and over again on this, and that's normal because it's a test environment. So don't worry about that. When you have documents in your system, you're going to have different information. So the first thing I want to say when we talk about version control, you can see a version column on this information here. So we can see version 2, version 3, version 5, version 1, etc. If I open up the metadata panel and I select any one of my documents, which has version 1, we can come down here under the version properties and see this is version 1 of 1. I'm just going to move that up there a little bit, make it a bit more centered. So we're at version 1 of 1, and I can view all versions. When I click this, it takes me over to a screen that shows me the history of document versions for this particular document. If I go back to my folder and I go to another document, let's go to this one. And again, we've got view all versions, and I click that and it takes me to the history. Now I can get to that same screen. Instead of going through here, I've got a link. I can also click on the version here, and that shows me the version history. Version 1, version 2, etc. So you can always access that version history from, if you can see the document, you'll be able to see the version history of it. There are some circumstances where you click on the version and you're not able to see all the prior documents to it. There's two reasons for that. First one is someone may have gone through and deleted the old versions of the document. When that happens, it doesn't renumber the documents. So if I come into here, let's take a look at this one. It's got 9 different versions of it. You can see that I'm missing version 8. Version 8 was deleted for whatever reason. Maybe there was fatal information in there that we couldn't allow to exist within the system. We didn't want it found even by accident. So we decided to delete that. It doesn't revert version 9 into version 8. It means we still maintain version 9 because we want to indicate that there was a version there. This is part of the audit record for this particular document. There's pieces of information that are carried forward into that. So when I take a look at any one of these, I can see what the history of this is by selecting the document and coming up to usage of file. So again, this is something that all your users who can see the document should be able to get into this to see the usage. And here I can see the actions that were performed on this document. So it was checked in, metadata was edited, it was downloaded, workflow is initiated, approved, initiated again, downloaded as part of that workflow process, and then workflow was approved. So I can see the actions that have happened as part of the audit record for this. You can also see the GUID, the GUID, the graphic user identification that's on generally it's Global Universal Identifier. Sorry, I don't know why I was thinking graphic user interface. My mistake. Anyway, we're seeing the GUID, the unique identifier for this one document that helps to distinguish it from something else, is attached to these for that workflow. So the unique identifier for the workflow is visible onto this here, so we can tell this workflow is different than that workflow down here because there are different numbers that are attached to it. And again, I can select any one of these, and if I wanted to, I don't see the version properties of this because these are just this is the audit record of activity. But if I go back over to here, I can select and I can see the metadata for this document. So if someone made changes between the metadata, that will be reflected over here. And that's why there's edits to metadata is available here as a function, so I can see what changes were made. And in this case, we can see that the document name was changed, date was added, reviewed by, notes. There's a series of changes made to the metadata. And again, I can track that information through. So I go back to the version history and I can click on the metadata fields for this document versus the metadata fields for this document and see any of the differences between them. So we're allowed to compare between that for the metadata. Remember, metadata is not the document. It's descriptive document or descriptive information about the document. It's details that refer to it. Down here again under our version properties, we've got version 7 of 9. Now something else that if you're an experienced FileHold user, you'll see down here the FileHold ID number. The decimal number for this indicates what the document version is. So this is document 5215.7, and if I click up here, we'll have 5215.9. Now, if I ever copy the URL for this, that's the address for this document. Let me just copy the default URL. And I'm just going to open up my notepad and I'm going to paste that. You'll see that the document ID that it gives me does not have a decimal in the end of it. It's not saying that this is, even though I'm looking at 52.9, it suggests that the version that I'm copying here is 5215, no decimal to it. That's the current version of the document. So if I'm back in my folder, wherever I am in my system, in this case, my favorites, I'm always seeing the current version of the document. If I make a change to this, I'd be seeing version 10. If I made another change, version 11 would appear here. I am not looking at my prior versions when I'm looking in my folders. That information is hidden behind here by clicking on the version or clicking on the view all versions from behind. So when we add new documents in, they automatically become version 1. If I needed to make a change to it, version 2, version 3, etc. What we're not seeing here is any interpreted information about what its version is. We're not dealing with 1.1s. We're not dealing with major or minor releases. We're not dealing with those sort of details about a document that are essential for figuring out where it is in your internal processes. That's a job for, in a basic way, we could use metadata for that, for capturing major or minor versions. We could also use a version control field, which is an option that we have on the schema. So you'll see that when you create document schemas, at the bottom of the schema, let's just click a new one here, you'll have an option to add a version control field. And so you can use this if you want to in order to add version information to a schema when it comes across. Now this can be modified by the user so that they can indicate when it's a 1.1 versus a 2.0, when they want to elevate a document to a new status. But you can also get this information via the metadata fields for the document. There's certain functions you can do with a version control field, such as it can be much more regulated. You can put prefixes in front of it. It can automatically assign numbers. We also have some custom solutions when we use this. So it's a way of optimizing the information that goes into this. It's not necessarily a major change that we're going to make to the document. It's another tool that we have in the arsenal. So if you want to use a proper version control field or a VCN, version control number, you can use that from over here, or make a custom metadata field for yourself that captures that major minor information for your own releasing system. So with that in mind, we can take a look here at our version properties. We can see our document versions. If I wanted to make a modification to any of these documents, I can. Another key detail, we've got some stoplight colors over here that are telling me what rights I have to these documents. Let's acknowledge I'm a system administrator here, and I probably own these documents because I'm the one who put them into here. So it's not a surprise that I have unrestricted rights to these documents, that I can do whatever I want to with them. When I select a document, I can delete it, I can check it out, I can make those changes to it. I've got all those functions available for me. This, however, is a record, and even though when I select it, we can see over here I'm the owner and I'm a system administrator, there's nothing that says I shouldn't be able to make changes to this, except it blocks me from it because checkout is not allowed for records. Records are preserved, so no further changes can be made to them within the system. I'm stopped from doing that. I also, let's go down to the bottom to my library archive, and I can open up sort of any of these areas. I don't really remember where I have documents in here, but let's just click on an area at random. There we go. Here's some invoices that I have, and they have been put into the archive, and they have a purple dot in front of them. When I select them, again, even though I'm the document owner, and even though I'm a system administrator, I can't check them out because we can't modify documents once they're in the archive, and I can't delete it because we can't delete archive documents manually. The only way to delete an archive document is to move it out of the archive and put it back into the library. All right, let's head back up to the My Favorites, because again, we're just looking at our tools over here. If I had somewhat restricted rights to it, that there's something that I'm not, that I might not be allowed to do, maybe I'm not allowed to delete the document. If I have some sort of restriction, it would be a yellow light on this. So if you see a yellow light, it doesn't mean you can't check it out and make changes to it. It simply means that the document has been, is in a state where you have some level of restriction onto it. Now, if I go to my checked out documents, now we see the red light on there. The red light is telling me restricted access, you can't make changes to this document right now. So again, even though I am the document owner for this, and even though I'm a system administrator, I still can't delete the content from here because the document has been checked out. So I'm restricted from that. And I also, even though I'm the person who checked this document out, I can't check it out again. Other users are not allowed to check this out. This document is preserved. Again, this is version control in action. You add in the new document, it's version 1. It stays in that state. Someone makes a change to it, it becomes version 2. When we check this document back in, we can point it either at the new version of this document or at an entirely different document if that's what my system process demanded. So when I click check in this document, I can use browse and I can locate where this is in my system. So here's our document over here, and I'm going to say OK, and that now becomes my new version of the document when this comes into FileHold. So I'm not restricted to only using the document that I've downloaded locally. I can also access other documents. Before I check this document in, I can edit the document's metadata, and I can also delete that local copy. So once I bring in this document, I get rid of that one that I had in before. We can also email other folder members that it's been checked in. This is an optional thing that's going to be turned on or off globally. Also worth pointing out, before I select this, I can say I have not checked in these documents. Please undo the checkout of the documents. This does not check the document back in, it simply releases the checkout. There's a big difference between those two things. If I say I have not changed these documents and undo the checkout, it means that no modifications will be made to it. So this relationship that I've created here will be broken, and the document would be checked back in, ready for someone else to check the document out. We're going to go ahead and check the document back in. The document gets checked back in and it disappears from my list here because this is only a list of checked out documents. So I'd have to go back into my repository to find that. But it would now be version 2 with any updated metadata that I may have done when I added the document in. You'll notice also too, I have over here a offline document. So offline documents do not have a real document attached to it, but they have metadata that might be appropriate for that document. They also carry an audit record. So again, we can go into the version history, we can select our document, we can look at the usage for it, and I can see any of the processes that may have been put onto this offline document. So we can treat it like something in FileHold. We can generate this audit record for it, but there's actually no document attached to it. It's just the metadata that might happen to be associated with this piece of information. All right, let's go back to our version history. We're going to take a look over here. We can see that here's our version 1, back to the folder, and here's our checked out documents. Now, when I actively check out a document, let's do that here to one of these. So even though it's a favorite, we're going to take this one and we're going to check out this document. Or we can select our document and hit the checkout here button on the ribbon, your choice. It's then going to ask me where I want to save a local copy of this document. Because it's going to download it for me, that's part of the process. Now, there's sometimes that if I was to check this document out a second, or if I was to check out a document with the same name for it, FileHold would stop me and say, you got two documents of the same name, what do you want to do? Or if I had forgotten that I had this document checked out and I attempted to download it again, FileHold might say, hey, you've already got a copy of this, what do you want to do with it? Again, it's trying to make sure I'm not overwriting material. Now, because this is a Word file, I have some other options that I can do with this. So let's go into our documents and then my FileHold documents, and here's a document that I just downloaded. When I double click this and open it up, here's my document opened up from my local source. Now I could have done that exact same action if I'd come over here to my Tools, Working Documents, and double clicked this document. So here's a point of distinction. If I double click this document here in my repository, I'm trying to download a new local copy of this document. In the My Working Documents section, these are your working documents, and therefore this is actually the document that's on your system. So we can see that this is the last version of it, it's been checked out, and it's not been modified. So I've got some details on that. I'm going to close that for now. We're going to go back over to Word, and here's our Word document, and let's just change this to something that's a bit more, let's move this up to a current day. Let's say that we're recycling an existing expense report. And we have quite a ways to go onto this, so we'll let's, you know what, rather than sit here and scroll, I'm just going to choose that as a new date for it. So I've got some new information onto this. I have changed my document. So when I hit my save onto this, it's going to just do a standard save, doesn't want to do anything else because, again, in this case, we're not dealing with any changes to it because it's already been checked out. I've got a FileHold button up on my ribbon. When I click this, it gives me three options. I can add this as a new document. So even though I've checked this out, I could still bring this back into FileHold as a brand new document. So it's not the final version of it or whatever business case there is. I want to add this as a new document. A lot more logical for me, though, to check this document in from here. Now, we've also got a new thing that we've added with FileHold 17, which is a quick check-in. And when I select quick check-in, it's going to bring the document in. It's not going to allow me to update the metadata, and it's going to close the local document. So it's literally for documents where I'm not looking at editing metadata and I don't need any fine-tuning to it. I'm just going to quick check in. In this case, I'm going to use my check-in option. And there it is, and it shows me my list of checked out documents. So I see I've got the right one selected, and my metadata panel opens up. Give myself a bit more room here, so I could update any of my fields if I wanted to. So I could choose, you know, the proper dates if I needed to. Again, we can change this to a more current date. So let's go January 2nd of 2023. And then I could make this my new date for it, delete the local copy, close the document, all the same options I have when I was checking in a document before. So we click check in, the document closes, that's what I've asked it to do. We go back into FileHold, and we're now at version 6, the document released. Now we have an extra set of tools that are available for us when it comes to Office products. We've got that button on the ribbon. We also get an additional level of protection. I don't have this with other software. We only have this with an Office integration. So you can't do this with a PDF. You can't do this with a, a CAD drawing or some other proprietary software. Where we're really dealing with this is when it comes to Office products. So if I double click this document, haven't accessed it before, this is a typo, it should not exist. Let's clear that off of the document. And now I'm just going to close this, right? Do you want to save the changes that you've made to this? Hey, you've modified this local document that you've just opened up for yourself. Yes, I do want to save the changes to this. Because it's an Office product, FileHold also steps in and gives me a warning. Do you want to check this document out? You're about to save a local version of this document. Do you want to check the source file out? Why, yes, I do. So you have made changes to this document. Do I want to check this in as a new version? If I'm just closing this for now, I could say, I'll check this in later, or I can choose check it in now, and then that same window pops up and I can update my information, check the document in. Oh, I need a date added onto this, so we'll use today's date. And I needed a reviewed by because obviously I have those blanked out. So Chris reviewed this. There we go. And now we're checked back in as our new version of the document. So again, we're carrying that information from time to time. So each time I'm engaging with this document as a Word file and I'm opening it up locally, I still get some level of protection. My advice is don't rely on that. Please, if you do plan on modifying a document, check it out from here just to make sure that you don't have something weird happen, like the FileHold system logs off because you've been inactive on it for too long and you're sort of relying on it. If you do plan on making changes to something in the system, do check the document out. It makes life a lot easier for it. Now, what we've been looking at so far is at the user level, at the document level for it. I do want to quickly point out one of the other functions we have in this, which is looking at the document usage log from an administration point of view. Now, before I do that, I just want to copy my document name because that's going to become useful for me in a moment. So I'm going to go over to our administration. We're going to go over to our web administration panel. And then from here, we're going to go to our, let's make that a little bit bigger for ourselves for the recording. And we're going to just minimize these so we get to our administration reports, document usage log. If when you go to the full administration menu, you don't see the document usage log, it's because you don't have a right to see it. This is only accessible to people who have a right to see all the documents, so likely system administrator or senior library admin. So if you're in those roles, I can then paste that name that I had and apply the filter, and it's going to show me the version history of everything that had that, any of those words that are in it. So we're seeing document name contains the values that I put into there. Now this is going to show me all the different document points and versions and history, and there's going to be a lot of content into this. In this case, you can see I've got a lot of different documents that I've pulled apart here. So let's just try that again with applying the filter, and that filters it down to just that one value. So before I was running it for all actions in the system, now we narrow it down. Because this file has a different name than the one that we had before, we don't see a complete audit record for that. I'd have to be a bit more general with it. Likely what you're going to want to do is come into this and see what the actions were or who performed it or a date range for when it may have happened or a value that the name contains. This is the way to get the larger record of all activities, and as always, we could export that as a CSV. So if I want to go into more chronological fashion and see what's happened with the document, I can do that over here with FileHold by clicking on the version and clicking on the history and seeing the usage of it. And like everything else, I can right click onto this and export that to a CSV file if I wanted to. So that's part of that administrative audit log that we have. So the great thing about version control is that it's automatic. If you're using FileHold, you already have version control. Everything you put into the system, if you've never modified anything, is already version 1. When you make changes to those documents, they become version 2, version 3, and those those round numbers are being used as their absolute versions. We don't care what the actual changes that you've made were, if they were relevant or significant or whatever else. And I think that wraps up everything for our version control session here today. David, do I have any questions that came in?
Yeah, there's one question. If you do have any other additional questions, just please type away and I will feed them over to Chris, who will answer them. So here's the question that you had, the one lone question so far. There have been times I added a document to the system for the first time, and it went in. And sorry, let me try that again. There have been times I added a document to the system for the first time, and it went in as a version 2 rather. Why would this happen?
That's likely happening because of OCR. So remember, one of the very important things about FileHold is that we never modify your original document under any circumstances. We don't compress it. We don't put it into a proprietary format. You give us a PDF, we store it as a PDF, we output it as a PDF. That includes a potential modification to the document. And when I say a potential modification, I mean something like OCR. So when we run optical character recognition over top of a PDF or a TIFF, and I expect that when we brought those documents in, they were automatically version 2, likely they were PDF or TIFF images. If that was the case, what we were doing is we were applying an optical character recognition or an OCR layer to the document. FileHold does a check-in, check-out process when that happens. So let me just see if I can find a document that may have gone through OCR. So that's a system process, so I can use an action. So let's look for my OCR of the file, and we'll search for that. So here's some OCRs, and you see that they're all different versions of the document. So if I click on this, and I click on my first document here, and I look at the usage of the file, it shows me added, copied, metadata edited, checked out, downloaded. So pretty typical actions to it. If I look at my second version of the document, and again, we go to the usage of the file, we can see our evidence there. Again, back to here, and then we'll take a look at this one, usage of file, and we'll see OCR of the file. So when we do that, text layer added and no compression, and then the time count to do that. So when we add OCR to it, that could be seen as a modification to the document. So we still have the original document here with no OCR layer on it as version 1. This is version 2, OCR layer applied.
Okay, and they go thumbs up for you, Chris.
All
So I
right,
guess you
yay.
answered that very well. All
Then
right.
done. Perfect. I mean, and it's a little unnerving to go, why am I on version 2 of this document? It's because the OCR layer was applied, and if you go back and look at the version history, that should be what happened.